Today, International Banker is in Belgium and joined by Johan Thijs, CEO of KBC Group, to discuss the bank's flourishing performance in banking and insurance, its expanding presence outside Belgium, and the business culture which has made the group successful. Nice to be here today.
A great pleasure to be your host today, and welcome to Belgium.
Now, with strongly consistent performance metrics over the last few years, KBC has managed to flourish at a time when much of the European sector has found it hard going. What are you doing well that other regional banks are simply not?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I don't know what all the other peers are doing, but what we have been doing in particular, and perhaps for a good understanding, we have been having a rough ride in 2008, 2009 during the crisis. But since then, KBC has actually been focusing extremely on the stuff we are good at, and that is banking and insurance, and combining the two together. And in doing so, we have been actually extremely focusing also in our way of execution. And last but not least, I think what we did extremely well is the combination of creating a strategy and creating a company culture which underpins the execution of that strategy.
And with your business model covering both banking and insurance, does it mean the majority of your client-facing staff need to be versed in both disciplines, or do you prefer to have separate specialists?
So when we're talking about the implementation of the bank insurance strategy in our distribution networks, intrinsically we work through relationship managers. So the client has actually one single point of contact. And that single point of contact, so the relationship manager, he can deal with the basic request of customers. Once the request becomes a bit more complicated, when it becomes a little bit more complex, the relationship manager is actually directing the customer towards a specialist, be it a banker, be it our insurance guy, so always somebody who is fully committed, fully be able to dive into the details of the métier, as we call it. So the customer actually has access to a single point of contact, and via him he can have access to, let's say, the 16,000 people in Belgium or the 38,000 people worldwide.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier the kind of tough times that you've had to come through, and you've managed to repay the financial support you received from both the Belgian national government and the Flemish regional government. You did that 5 years ahead of schedule. How severely would you say that you had to kind of adapt your business plan in order to deliver such a swift repayment?
I would compare it as follows. If you would compare KBC today with KBC where it was, let's say, in 2009, it is a completely different company. It is no way the same. It is no way comparable. And that is because not only the type of business we're currently involved in, but also the size, the culture, everything was completely readjusted after the crisis. KBC has become, in terms of risk-weighted assets, 40% smaller. In terms of balance sheet, 30% smaller. We have been divesting more than 30 companies across the world. We have been refocusing our activities. We have been defining our strategy to what it is today, a bank insurance group, which was also the case before the crisis, but a bank insurance group dealing with retail customers, SME and mid-caps, and that's it. We have been introducing a new company culture, which is completely different to what we were used to, and we have been emphasizing, really emphasizing, customer centricity as the core of our activity, of our being. And that is a fundamental change.
And thinking about change, one of the biggest impacts in the banking world generally has been digitization. How have you kind of accommodated that in your business model?
So we were well aware that despite the fact that we have indeed been state aided back in 2009, and that was a major blow up in confidence, we were well aware that that was one issue to tackle. But in the meanwhile, so in let's say since 2011-12, it became very apparent that digitalization was the next big thing. And I always said that I consider the change or the impact on our business model of the new digital era is of a greater impact than the banking crisis was. It seems to be a bit odd, but really I'm convinced that's a given. So when we were in 2012 announcing our new cultural change, we immediately added to that digitalization was the next big thing. And in 2014 we announced a big investment program in that respect, which completely changed our business model. So the implementation of that part of our strategy now is ongoing for, let's say, 2.5 years. And I would say in terms of the front end, so the customer-facing side of our activities, we're almost there. The next big thing is now, what I call the digitalization of our back end, and that's big, that's huge.
Yeah. Now, thinking about kind of innovation and changes, one of your ways of monitoring long-term performance is using KPIs, key performance indicators, and one of those links directly to innovation. How are you able to materially measure in the real world changes and improvements in innovation? How do you do that?
You will be surprised, but actually we're not measuring it. So you know, innovation is key in what we are doing. But in KBC, innovation is as such not a target. What we have as single target is improve the satisfaction of our customers. And in order to do so, we need to be proactively anticipating what their customer needs are, also the changes in their needs. Now, what we do in order to facilitate that anticipation is use technology as a driver or a means to an end. And innovation is part of that. So to become innovative, we don't have a team of, let's say, 10, 15, 20, whatever people, but we actually ask our whole staff to become part of that innovative way of thinking to improve the customer experience. Mm-hmm. So actually what we are doing is, if we have issues on the table, we just pitch with our 38,000 people and let them come up with the idea. And that has been extremely successful in the past. They can give you plenty of ideas which actually come out of our staff, which we were pitched for and which ultimately brought it to a business idea which we implemented, which have been winning prizes over the last couple of years, and amongst others, that's the reason why you are here today. So you gave us the prize of the most innovative bank. We're very proud on that one as well. Yeah.
And again, reflecting on change, you have launched the Start It at KBC project, which I think that was a couple of years ago. Interesting way to promote business startup activity in Belgium. How successful has that been?
And it's nice that you reflect about this example, because that was one of those pitches which was made by one of my members of my staff somewhere in the Belgian business unit. And to be quite frank, it's quite funny to know that that idea didn't make it to the final round, so they not became the winner of the pitch game. But it was number 5 or something, and I picked up because somebody pulled my attention on it and said, please, Johan, could you consider granting some money, some budget to this one? We did in 2010. In the meanwhile, started at KBC, which actually is a platform for people which have a good idea, don't have facilities, don't have a company, would like to establish their startup. We create a platform in which we enable them an atmosphere or an environment which does not create hassle, so that they can be busy with the development of their idea. In the meanwhile, it has become the biggest incubator in Belgium. We do have on the platform 430 startups today, which is big.
Now, thinking of those startups, are there any specific digital products that KBC has launched recently which you'd care to mention?
So we have been launching quite a lot. But when I only look at Belgium, it was already in 2009, 2010, we were launching one of the first the mobile banking app, which has made it to the most innovative app in most countries which we currently are present, not only in Belgium but also in Central Europe. We have been launching recently, very recently, a collaboration with another peer of us in the payment area, where we already anticipate the PSD2 directive, which is the directive dealing with the payment area. So we are already, let's say, 2018 compliant in that respect. And another one, and that's also an idea which has been worked out by our staff themselves, that is, and we're quite proud on that one as well. In Ireland, we are the only bank which can fully digitally onboard a customer, and that is, let's use the term again, that's quite innovative.
Now, you mentioned Central Europe there. So what have been some of the main features of countries such as the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, that have encouraged you to expand your presence there?
So, for a good understanding, the merit that KBC is in a lot of countries in Central Europe, I mean, we are in Czech Republic, we are Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, that merit is actually from my predecessors, because the decision to expand our business in that area of Europe is taken by my predecessors back in the, let's say, the early years of 2000. The reason why we have been doing so is actually twofold. First of all, like many other European groups, we were thinking about expansion. We were present in Belgium, we were present in all the countries in Western Europe, we were present in Asia, in the United States, in the UK. But what about Central Europe? And what about expanding our activities in Western Europe as well? Now, always supply and demand, prices go up. Obvious conclusion became Western Europe becomes very expensive. there is a big opportunity rising in Central Europe, Eastern Europe. So let's look into that. And when we were doing so, in the early days, it was not always granted by the financial markets to be a successful move. But history has shown that we were right. And now, give you one example, Czech Republic has become the second pillar of our group. It is standing next to Belgium as a very important profit contributor, stability contributor to the KBC Group.
Okay. Now, in a world of acronyms, you've got quite a good one, I think. PEARL, which stands for Performance Empowerment, Accountability, Responsiveness and Local Embeddedness. How do those qualities help your employees better serve your customers?
So it's indeed a very interesting one. I think that is one of the main contributors for the success of KBC. It is intrinsically the way we implement our culture. When we launched this back in 2012, in the midst of the crisis, we were still state aided. It was not done. You know, if you talk to analysts at that time, they were only expecting us to talk about ROE, the income growth, etc. And we started to talk about the cultural change. It was not always well received at the beginning, you know, but after a while, they started to understand why we did it. What we have been doing, that is intrinsically aligning the whole mindset of the group in one single go and one single direction. And the combination, for instance, the R and the L combined, responsiveness and local embeddedness, actually means local responsiveness. And that means that you only take into account the fulfillment of local needs of your customers. So you are fully customer-centric. And that reflection, which is since 2012 part of the group, actually aligned the full group in one single direction. Let's serve our customers and let's do it better.
Another of the stated principles upon which the business strategy rests is this idea of meeting responsibility to society and, as you were just saying, local economies. What are some of those responsibilities and how do you ensure that they're actually met?
So again, we have learned a lot out of the crisis, you know, and one of those elements I think all banks have been taking up since 2008 was we as financial institutions, be it a bank, be it an insurance company, we have to fulfill our role in society. Now, a role in society, obviously, I mean, when you talk about a bank or an insurance company, everybody says, yeah, it's lending because the European economy is financed, let's say, for 80% by banks, or on the insurance side that is granting cover for the entrepreneurial ideas, whatever. But that's the obvious part. So when we were dealing with what is our role in society, next to what I just said, is we have to do other stuff as well. We need to be aware that we have impact on the environmental issues. We have a role to play in the financial literacy of our customers or our potential prospects. And we need to support also the entrepreneurial behavior in our world, because that's the step preliminary to granting loans. And that role, in our definition, was then added with what about health and what about longevity, which are two particular issues in the respective markets which we're currently present. Combining them all together, that is what we consider as our role. And that is something which we can pick up, and which we can influence. And for that reason, it became part of our strategy.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned the financial crisis. How important is it to you that since that your customers really do understand the products that you're offering them?
I think it's key. I'm quite convinced also with new regulation which is coming up. We have been confronted over the last couple of years with AML, so anti-money laundering. We have been confronted with Know Your Customer. We will be confronted with MiFID II. We already have MiFID I, which is always in the same direction. That is customer protection, consumer protection, and it makes a lot of sense. On that same note, we were indeed also confronting with the increasing complexity of products, and as a consequence, customers which are unknowing not necessarily knowing what to buy, that our role is indeed to explain them very well, so at the end of the day, they will not be surprised by the outcome. And for that particular reason, we took that particular part into our strategy, into our role in society, and therefore it's key.
Now, you mentioned earlier how the Czech market is kind of supporting what you're doing. And one of your stated goals is to look for market leadership, top 3 bank, top 4 insurance in core countries by 2020. Which of the core countries would you say you're currently furthest away from achieving that goal, and how are you setting about remedying that?
Now, actually, you should make a distinction between banking and insurance, because there is not quite an equilibrium everywhere. We are market leader in Belgium in both domains, so banking and insurance. We are market leader in Czech Republic on the banking side, in Hungary, where we're both now number 2. We are market leader kind of in Slovakia, we're number 4, close to the number 3 position. But on the other hand, in banking, in Bulgaria, for instance, we only have a position number 3, and in Ireland, where we are present, our position is also lower than the market leadership. So there we have room for expansion. On the insurance side, it's a bit more complicated. Already mentioned Belgium, which is market leadership. Bulgaria, same. We are number 2 or 3, depends how you calculate it. All the other markets, we have a market share lower than the top 3. So where we are furthest away, I mean, I can give you examples on the banking side, insurance side, but we have countries where we need to expand our current activities. And that is currently what we are doing. We are looking into some opportunities to strengthen our positions.
I like that, the way you're doing that, because what you're saying is it's opportunity. It's
Yes,
not a
indeed.
challenge, it's opportunity.
I mean, we always consider, and that's true for the digitalization as well, we consider this to be an opportunity. It is triggering something in us, and it actually, I mean, it forces us to think differently and to act upon that. And that is how we made KBC to what it is today, and that's what we are going to do for the future.
Now, you've been in post for 4 years as the Group Chief Executive Officer. What's been the one achievement of which you are most proud?
I mean, there are plenty of achievements which I could mention. Payback of state aids much earlier than planned. Perhaps the following would be one to consider, because it's not an easy one to copy. We created an atmosphere in KBC, an environment which allows us to make our people to become more entrepreneurial, so that they can put all their skills, all their talents into KBC to become the reference in the bank insurance market. And that environment, which we created with a lot of people, which is built upon the acronym PEARL, I think it's the major contributor. So I'm very proud of that one.
Johan, thank you indeed for your time today.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you.